Happy 88th birthday, Warren.
Well, thank you. It's also my anniversary, too.
Well, there you go. Thank you for spending some of it with us.
Good to be here.
So the reason we're here today, wine bottles and all, is because someone paid $3.3 million to have lunch with you.
That's correct.
For a very important cause, and that's the Glide Foundation, which sole purpose is to break the cycle of poverty and marginalization for people in this country.
It shows that somebody cares for somebody that didn't think anybody cared.
Why is this cause so important to you?
Well, it's for real, for one thing. I mean, I was a little skeptical at first, but my first wife kept saying this is something special. And so I actually went to church there on a Sunday, but then I met Cecil Williams, and I saw the people that he was helping, and I saw these people that they'd given up on themselves. Their friends had given up on them. They thought the world had given up on them, but Cecil never gave up. And so now they've changed the lives of thousands and thousands of people one at a time. And I've never been able to do that, but I love supporting somebody that spent over 50 years now doing that, and they'll continue to do it.
There are only so many millionaires and billionaires who can give back in the way you do. Not all of them do. And I thought it was interesting because in an email that you sent to the billionaire investor Leon Koperman, you wrote that a disproportionately low number of people who made their fortune on Wall Street have donated to the Giving Pledge, obviously the foundation that you have set up with Bill and Melinda Gates to give the majority of wealth to those in need. You're basically saying Wall Street billionaires aren't giving enough away.
Well, I'm saying that there's a disproportionately low number of them compared to people elsewhere. Leon is a terrific, I mean, he's going to give away 90% plus. And there's others, but there's two groups. Well, I shouldn't say just two necessarily, but there's another group that the inheritors generally are less inclined to too, because they feel they're breaking a covenant that their grandfather gave it to their father and their father gave it to them, so they don't feel like they should.
So they should keep it?
Well, I don't think they should, but
right,
but
they think.
It's tough if it's all tied up in a family business too.
Sure.
But no, I think that if you're lucky in this world, and a lot of what was determined about us was the moment we were born. You know, where we were born, who we were born to. I mean, you know, your zip code really is important in determining your future. And
the ovarian lottery.
Absolutely.
Winning it, as you say.
The ovarian lottery. And I've been lucky, you've been lucky, most of our friends have been lucky.
Very.
And a lot of people aren't lucky.
What is, Warren, the number one thing that the Trump administration could do right now to help the most marginalized in society? I
think we could reform and expand the earned income tax credit. I think people don't need a minimum wage. They need a maximum amount of cash in their pocket, and the earned income tax credit rewards those who work, but they also help the person whose skills don't fit a market economy. Your skills fit a market economy. My skills fit a market economy. Not everybody's do. If this was a sports economy, I'd starve to death. You could give me 6 hours of retraining every day, and I could practice at night. I wouldn't be any good. And so we want a market economy, but a rich family does not leave people behind.
Has the president called you? Because I know you've said you don't pick up the phone and call presidents.
I've never called the president.
You've never called the president. Has President Trump called you and asked for your advice on that or on the economy?
No, but if he ever did, I'd give him my best advice. But the answer is no, and they shouldn't. I mean, very few presidents have called me. Certainly don't, you know, probably the most times I've ever been called by a president might be 4 times or something like that.
The stock market is at record highs. Unemployment is below 4%. Economic growth in the second quarter was 4.1%. Is the economy, the U.S. economy, as strong as President Trump says it is, or are you seeing some warning signs?
Well, the economy has gotten steadily stronger since the third quarter of 2009. And quarter by quarter, you know, we were adding, sometimes we'd add 100,000 jobs a month, sometimes we'd add 200,000, and it's come back from being in the emergency ward in 2009, and it continues to. I mean, the economy is very good now. You see certain things, new home construction hasn't been as strong as I would have thought it might be, but it's still strong. And, you know, autos may be off a little, but that it's off from a figure that.
But as you know, there are people who watch the market very closely, watch the economy very closely, who say, look, this has been a 9-year run. This has been a 9-year bull market. Those are cracks that we're starting to see and I'm worried about a recession sooner than later. Do you think we are due for a recession sooner than later?
Well, America's been on a 242-year run. I mean, it just gets interrupted a little bit, but I mean, if you're looking for a run, just look around. There was nothing here in 1776, and now look what we've got. So,
right.
So we're on a run. It gets interrupted, and it will get interrupted from time to time, and I don't have the faintest idea when it'll happen, and whether it's 9 years old or 9 months old, it can still happen at any time.
You're not worried?
I'm not worried about the long-term future of America, no, and I don't worry about the short-term. That makes me a happy guy.
Taxes. Do you think, because of tax reform, we have lower taxes, largely for the most wealthy in this country, do you think lower taxes will provide more in a long-term boost to the economy, or is this a little bit of a sugar rush?
Well, I would rather have any tax cuts overwhelmingly go to the people that are kind of watching while the rest of the world, the rest of the country prospers.
But the majority aren't. I mean,
well,
the majority of the cuts.
Yeah, no, the tax cuts favored Berkshire Hathaway.
You.
Well, not so much me. I'm going to give it all away anyway. But we've got 1 million plus shareholders, and we in effect had a partner in the U.S. government that owned 35% of our income stream. It didn't own the assets. It didn't have a stock certificate, but it owned 35% of the earnings, and there were a lot of variations in that, but basically it did. And all of a sudden, they gave us 14% back. That increased our shareholders' share of the earnings from 65 to 79%. We got 20% of the company back for nothing. So
is this the basis for a long-term boost, or is this a little bit of a sugar rush?
Well, it isn't a sugar rush, but the question of who you tax and how you handle the expenditures of government, what government should expend it for. But there's no question that corporations, owners of those corporations, benefited significantly.
Let's talk about growth. The Congressional Budget Office predicts 2.4% growth next year. President Trump touts and has touted 4%. He even said up to 6% economic growth annually on his watch. Do you think that will happen on an annual basis? I don't have the faintest idea. I think the United States per capita will have growth over time, and it's done magnificently, for a couple hundred years doing that, but it doesn't do it in a straight line. And I don't have any idea of what any quarter, any year is going to be, and my experience is that economists don't either. Let's talk a little bit of politics. You are a Democrat. You are
Correct.
A very vocal supporter of Hillary Clinton. Do you think, as we head into the midterms, Warren, that Democrats right now have a clear message that they can win on?
Well, I'm not a card-carrying Democrat. I've given money for Republicans to Republicans. I've voted for Republicans, but I vote for more Democrats, and I certainly supported Hillary in 2016. But you have a lot of people that are going to vie for the Democratic nomination. You've got 435 different people running for Congress, presumably as Democrats. They're going to have a lot of different views. I think there is no super rallying cry, except elect us, basically. But there's never been a totally unifying force in either party.
But do the Democrats right now, if they want to retake the House, for example, if they want to win in 2020, need a super rallying cry? Because there is the super liberal progressive wing that we've seen win a number of these early primaries, and then there's the more centrist.
We'll find out. I mean, we do not know the answer to that. But what we do know is when an election's 65 or whatever, 70 days away, that a lot of things can happen, and it'll depend on two things. It'll depend on which party has the most excited in terms of turnout, because turnout really makes a difference. And then the second thing, it'll be the slice in the middle, but who they're attracted to.
Is there a name, someone you like for 2020 yet?
There's going to be a lot of names, and there's no one that, I'll make a decision on 2020 and 2020.
Before we move on, do you feel at all as though the Democratic Party as a whole has lost its direction a bit after, for example, the deplorable comments? Are you concerned about their direction when it comes to the working class and the Rust Belt, for example? Well,
no, I think I've lived under 15 out of 44 presidents. I'm more than a third of the presidents, and there's my dad was in Congress, and
a Republican in Congress.
He was a Republican, and he was a Republican with a Republican Congress and a Democratic Congress. And believe me, it was a lot more fun to be in the majority. I think politicians behave very much as they have over the years. I think the profession self-selects to a degree, and I think some of them do it for ideology, and some of them do it for ego, and some of you get a mix, and somebody said motivation should never be used in the singular. So I mean, some of them are some mixture of ambition, really caring about ideology, and that'll continue forever.
Let me ask you about capitalism. As someone who has benefited greatly from capitalism, there's a new Gallup poll out that stunned me. And what it shows is that for the first time over the past decade, Democrats have a more positive view of socialism than they do of capitalism. I'm not kidding. Positive view of capitalism.
I think I read that.
47% positive view of socialism, 57%. Your take on that? And
they haven't. My take is they haven't tried it. They can find plenty of socialist. I don't see people migrating from the capitalist system to socialist systems, and I would describe our system more as a market system. I mean, and a market system which has to be modified in certain ways, but does push resources and talent and everything to things people are going to want in the future. I think it's a remarkable system.
So capitalism is still best for America?
Oh, the market system is, I would call it the market system, but we'll call it capitalism too. I vote for capitalism.
On nuclear weapons, because this is something you talk extensively about in your concern. You told me when we sat down just days after the 2016 election, the most important thing is what person, being president, is most likely to minimize the chances of weapons of mass destruction being used. Has President Trump minimized that risk?
Well, it's very hard to measure, Poppy. I mean, it's very hard to measure anybody, any president, because there are so many moving pieces, and there are times when you have to be tough. There are times when there's times when you give some. There's times when you crack down. It is very hard to It's very tough to figure out with the cyber threat, in addition to nuclear, chemical, and biological. I mean, there are lots of people in the world, and there are some tribes of some sort, and there's a few nations that really wish ill on us and other people, and they have way more weapons at their fingertips.
As we sit here today versus where we were when you and I sat down 2 years ago, a few days after the election, on that front of weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, do you feel safer?
Well, I feel the world gets ever more dangerous. I mean, I think cyber now is a lot different than it was even when we talked a couple of years ago, and that is not good. And I think so. I think the ability of a country or even an individual to inflict massive damage increases, and I think that it's the United States government and other governments around the world to work. And that's job number one by miles.
Right.
The economy will take care of itself, but it is a dangerous world with the kind of weaponry, including cyber, that is available to the people that wish us ill.
Let's talk about healthcare.
Sure.
Because
it's easier to talk about than change.
You have taken on healthcare by storm. You've teamed up with Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, to basically turn the healthcare industry and health insurance industry on its head, to lower costs, make it more effective. What is success in your mind on that front? What does this become? Because the health insurers are freaked out.
It becomes, well, they shouldn't be necessarily, but the whole system does not. It was interesting when we were interviewing people to be in charge. Everybody agrees that there's a better system out there, but they just don't think it involves them.
They're not the problem.
They're not the problem. I mean, that's human nature. I'd be the same way. But the goal is to check this tapeworm of costs. 18% of GDP. I mean, that dwarfs everything, and growing. At the very least, we've got to figure out a way to check that, preferably reduce it a little bit, getting closer to other countries, and have a better outcome for people.
So what about
and that's not that's a very, very, very tough job.
It sounds like the health insurers should be a little bit concerned, or at least that their business might have to change. But what about those that are running on the single payer promise right now? Is that the answer?
Well, it may be the answer we end, not we as, I mean the country,
Right.
ends up with just because voters are going to decide it. I mean, it's a very important issue. I would like to see, obviously, the private sector arrive at something that gets the cost benefits of that and eliminate some of the downsides of it, and where people in the end feel they're getting better health care than they were under the present system, and instead of being 18%, it might be 16% or something like that.
Getting better.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
On Apple. So I've learned this morning that Berkshire has bought up even more Apple shares, correct?
Not a huge amount.
Well, you already own 239
that is
million
true.
shares,
Well,
which is
we
21%.
We own more than we did on June 30, but not a lot.
Well, look, that's 21 plus, percent of Berkshire's portfolio. So it's a lot. You like Apple. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And here are my two questions on Apple. Is there anything that Apple is doing right now that makes you think that it won't eventually lose its dominance the way that IBM did?
That's the question always. I mean, BlackBerry, I mean, AOL, I mean, you can name all kinds of slide rules. So, typewriters, that's the question. I mean, anytime you have a magnificent castle on the hill, people are going to come and try to take it away from you. That's the market system, and I love it.
But you wouldn't be buying it if you thought that castle was falling apart.
I think it's a hell of a castle, and I think that the knight in charge of the castle is terrific.
You're talking about Tim Cook.
Yeah.
Why do you like him so much? Why do you think he's so effective?
Well, I don't know what's in his genes or anything, but he is a very, very good manager. I mean, people were, just because he succeeded Steve Jobs, I mean, everybody say, who's this guy, basically. Well, we know who this guy is, and he is a very, very good manager. But it is a business where you have a whole lot of people figuring, how am I going to take the castle away from you?
Yeah. As we end, a little bit of rapid fire. Bitcoin.
A bad ending.
Apple.
I love it.
Are we in a trade war? Yes, no.
Well, we're in a trade skirmish. There's no question about it.
Skirmish.
I mean, it's different and we don't want it to turn into a war, and it shouldn't turn into a war, and it's in everybody's interest that it doesn't turn into a war. And
that's right.
What you hope comes out of it is even better relations and more trade throughout the world.
Optimistic?
I'm optimistic, yeah.
What keeps you up at night?
Well, nothing. I take Ambien.